A long time ago, there was a man, and this man was called Peter Molyneux. You may well have heard of Mr. Molyneux in recent history for being the man who can't keep promises he makes or finish games that he starts, or the guy that made that annoying as hell game Curiosity. But that's beside the point, because back in the 90s he was rather well thought of in the gaming industry for making games like Syndicate, Populous and Theme Park as part of the game development studio Bullfrog Productions. In July 1997, through their publisher EA, Bullfrog Productions released a little real-time strategy game called Dungeon Keeper. Dungeon Keeper was different to most RTSs in that it was set underground and you were the bad guy. You controlled the game with the mouse, represented as a hand to do most tasks. Digging out dirt for rooms, picking up gold, slapping minions when they aren't working hard enough, casting spells and interacting with the land. Although you can also use the keyboard for movement around the map, rotating the screen, zooming in and out and walking around in first person mode once you'd learned the possession skill and taken over a minion's body. The aim of the game was to build an evil underground layer, mining resources like gold and gems along the way to pay for various rooms and traps, to pay your minions' wages and to train your minions' levels, with help from your mentor guiding you to the end goal of defeating each level's hero, or any rival keepers, while defending your own dungeon heart from being destroyed and causing you to lose the level. As you progress through the game, you unlock new rooms, which in turn attracts new minions to correspond to that room. Libraries attract warlocks, or torch chambers attract the mistress, and so on. An expansion pack was released in November of 1997 called the Deeper Dungeons, which had 15 more levels and improved enemy AI. And in December of 1998 there was a gold edition that featured the original game, the expansions, 3D patches, a game editor and a novella recounting the story of a hero killed while exploring the dungeons. This would be Peter Molyneux's final game before leaving Bullfrog, and in my opinion his magnum opus. Roughly 2 years later, in June of 1999, Bullfrog released Dungeon Keeper 2. This time around the game was fully 3D rendered, with vast improvements to the graphics. The game was very similar to the first, with only a few changes, including addition of new minions while others had been removed, a different way of training your minions to gain high level, and a few extra rooms. The game also featured a few extra modes, including Skirmish, Multiplayer and My Pet Dungeon. In Skirmish mode, the player is pitted against bots in the form of other keepers. The goal is to defeat each of these enemy keepers and take over their land. This mode was generally fairly easy to beat as the enemy AI was not particularly intelligent. The multiplayer mode was also fairly basic, with only 4 maps upon release, later raised to 12 via an online patch, and My Pet Dungeon, which was a free-form sandbox mode, or a kind of practice mode if you will, with set goals like reaching a certain amount of points, with the option to carry on playing after these goals were reached, and invasions only happening when the player triggers them manually. There was also a video on some discs for Dungeon Keeper 3 War for the Overworld, which was going to be the first entry into the series set above ground. The video featured no actual gameplay, but was more than enough for fans of the series to be happy with the knowledge they were going to get a third game. A new game, a game above ground. Except, we didn't, did we EA? Because you canned it, didn't you EA? And so that was it. No Dungeon Keeper 3 and disappointment all round. But wait, what's this? 13 years later, an announcement pops up from EA and Mythic Entertainment saying they're working on a Dungeon Keeper game for mobile. Well, okay, it's not a PC game, but hell, it's got to be better than nothing, right? Wrong. In 2013, after 13 years of waiting, we were given what was quite possibly the worst kick in the face a Dungeon Keeper fan could possibly get. A god-awful, dull, boring, generic click and wait game that was, and still is, antagonising to play. But don't despair, boys and girls, for if you don't want to wait 4 hours to mine a block of dirt, you can give us all your money and do it instantly, because fuck you and your Dungeon Keeper. I tried to like this game. I tried to forgive its awful money-grabbing ways, because it was a Dungeon Keeper game. Hell, it even had Richard Ridings back as the voice of your mentor. But I just can't. I can't condone this evil, despicable turd of a game, because that's what it is. Even with slapping Dungeon Keeper brand all over it, it's still a turd. And you can't polish a turd, because at the end of the day, all you're left with is a slightly shinier turd. So, what are we left with? 2 amazing games, and 1 evil little turd. But that's not all, because in 2012, something popped up on Kickstarter. Something called War for the Overworld. And this glorious little bastard of a game could be the saviour. Developed by Subterranean Games, War for the Overworld is a spiritual successor to Dungeon Keeper, inspired by Dungeon Keeper, and basically is Dungeon Keeper 3. With the aforementioned Peter Molyneux even urging people to buy this game, it has to be good, right? Hell, they even hired Richard Ridings to be the voice of your mentor, so surely this is the closest thing we're going to get to an actual Dungeon Keeper game. And let's be honest, it's probably better than anything EA could come up with, as I'm sure they'd probably be throwing microtransactions around like their lives depended on it. So, what's War for the Underworld actually like? Well, it certainly looks like Dungeon Keeper, and it plays like Dungeon Keeper as well. Subterranean Games have done an amazing job at capturing everything about Dungeon Keeper that made it a fun RTS. The gameplay is exciting enough to keep you interested, with missions designed to keep you engaged during the levels, although as with any RTS, gameplay can occasionally feel a little slow at times while you're waiting for your minions to build traps and defensive weapons, or just mining out enough gold that you can afford to pay your minions wages. You can certainly tell the developers were true fans of the original Dungeon Keeper games, with such a high attention to detail and the games being so similar, yet different enough that it doesn't feel like a rehashed HD remake of the originals. The game looks great and keeps the original aesthetic, but isn't so over the top graphically that it won't run on a lower spec computer. The game's background music is creepy enough to build tension, and the voice acting is pretty damn good too. I must say, when I first played the game it was in beta, and I wasn't particularly impressed. It was obviously buggy and hadn't got much content, and I kind of forgot about it afterwards with other things keeping me occupied, but I'm glad as hell I decided to give it another spin, because now it's in version 1.2, the game's come along leaps and bounds. And for £23, which works out about $35 US, it's a pretty competitively priced game. There is an Underworld edition with some extra content that will cost you about 30 Great British pounds or roughly $45, but even at that price I still think it's worth it. So after 15 years of waiting, do we finally have a game worthy of the Dungeon Keeper crown? Good lord, yes.